Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. He returned from war expecting peace, but found strangers living in his home, his name erased, and his life sold for $100. What began as a shocking mistake unraveled into a web of lies, fraud, and betrayal. This wasn't just theft, it was war on the home front. There's a strange rhythm to flying back from deployment, that moment when your boots finally hit U.S. soil again. There's relief, yeah, but also this eerie quiet that settles inside your chest. You expect joy, but what you really get is a surge of questions. Did anything change? Will home feel like home? For me, the answer came quicker than I could have ever imagined. I touched down in Phoenix on a dry, cloudless Tuesday, 6 months and 13 days since I'd left for the Middle East. I'd done 3 deployments before, but this one hit different. Maybe because it was supposed to be the last. I'd filed all the proper notices before I left. Postal hold, county record office, bank. Even that petty HOA my house technically bordered but never belonged to in any enforceable way. I'd left a stack of notarized paperwork with my attorney, Ben Martin, just in case anything happened while I was gone. I was thorough. That's the tech in me. You don't work avionics on F-16s and get to cut corners. My old pickup, kept in a friend's garage, started up like a dream. I let the AC whine a little while I sat in the driver's seat, soaking in the fact I was finally done. The road up to Prescott felt like memory. Every curve, every billboard, every mile of that desert familiarity, until I turned off the main road and into my neighborhood. Silver Bluffs. The name always sounded like a retirement resort brochure. My dad, a Navy vet himself, left me the house after he passed. A small but proud place. 1-story tan stucco, desert landscaping. I kept neat because I respected the land and the neighbors, even if they didn't always return the favor. Only this time, something was off. It started with the mailbox. It had someone else's name taped over mine in sloppy handwriting. I frowned, pulled up into the driveway, and froze. There was a red compact SUV parked in front of the garage. Patio furniture I'd never seen before sat on the front porch with a cheery cactus print cushion that definitely wasn't mine. My porch light had been swapped out. The welcome mat was missing, and most damning of all, when I tried my key in the front door, it didn't fit. I stood there for a second, heat crawling up the back of my neck, running options in my mind like it was a troubleshooting checklist. I knocked. A woman opened the door. Early 40s, athletic, sharp haircut, wearing flip-flops and a smug expression like she was waiting for a package and got a Marine instead. "Can I help you?" she asked, glancing down at my duffel bag. "Yeah," I said slowly. "I live here. Or I'm supposed to." She laughed, then called behind her, "Babe, he's here." A man in cargo shorts appeared, big guy, too big for the house I remembered furnishing. "I think there's a misunderstanding," I said, already feeling my stomach tighten. "This is my property. I've owned this house for over a decade. I've been on active deployment for the last 6 months." They exchanged glances like I'd just claimed to be Elvis. "No," she said. "We bought this house fair and square, from the HOA, at auction." I blinked. "From who?" "Silver Bluffs HOA. They listed it, held an auction last month. We won. $1,100. A steal, right?" My ears rang. $1,100. They said it like it was a Craigslist pickup. I stepped back, trying to process. My tools, my medals, my dad's flag case, my documents, my photos, everything I owned. I asked hoarsely, "Where are my things?" The woman actually shrugged. "No idea. HOA said the house was abandoned." Abandoned. That word hit like a fist. Before I could respond, the man pulled out his phone and said, "Look, if you're going to keep insisting, we'll call the cops." "Go ahead," I said. "I'll wait right here." I didn't raise my voice, didn't storm the porch, just stood there. Like the last 6 months hadn't been enough hell, and now I was being accused of squatting in my own home. The cops came, 2 deputies, both local. One of them looked at me with vague recognition, the way someone recognizes a high school teacher from 20 years ago. They took statements, looked at the documents the couple waved in their faces. Then the senior one pulled me aside. "Sergeant Riggs, right?" "Yeah." He rubbed his chin. "I'm sorry, but it looks like the property title was legally transferred. I checked the county registrar on the way here. Sale went through 3 weeks ago. Your name's no longer on it." I stared at him. "But it's my house. Paid off. Owned outright. I left a power of attorney with my lawyer." He sighed, genuinely uncomfortable now. You'll have to take it up with the HOA. This is beyond us for tonight. I asked if I could go inside, just for a minute, just to see if my father's flag was still on the mantle. They said no. That night I slept in my truck, parked 2 streets over, engine off. No AC. Just a silent scream in my throat and a steel rod of disbelief jammed behind my ribs. They took my house, while I was out defending theirs. By morning, the anger had hardened into something colder, quieter, and far more dangerous. I wasn't about to yell on someone's lawn or throw a tantrum outside a house with strangers inside. I'm a technician, not a hothead. I troubleshoot, I document, and right now, I was looking at the biggest system failure of my life. First thing I did was call Ben, my attorney, a guy I've trusted since I inherited the house from my dad. He's sharp, former JAG, knew property law and Arizona statutes like the back of his hand. When he picked up and I explained what happened, there was this long pause on the other end. "They sold your house?" he repeated slowly, like he thought maybe I hit my head on the flight back. "Yeah, HOA claims I owed back dues. Auctioned it for $1,000. New couple's already moved in." "Jesus! Okay, did they notify you?" "They say they did, but I left your name and mailing address with them, remember? You got anything?" "No," he said. "Not a single letter. No email, no certified mail, nothing." He was already booting up his system before we hung up. Said he'd start with a property status pull from the county clerk's office and review the HOA charter. I trusted him, but part of me already knew this ran deeper than some clerical error. I parked outside a greasy diner with free Wi-Fi and opened my laptop. I wanted eyes on the HOA's official website, Silver Bluffs Community Services, they called themselves. It was as bland and smug as I remembered. There was a section for HOA foreclosure process, which made my blood boil. They treated it like a service they offered. Right underneath were public auction notices, recently scrubbed. Nothing about my house. I found their contact page and called the number. Got voicemail. Fine. I drove straight to their office. Tiny beige building attached to a tennis court no one used. Inside, I was greeted by a front desk receptionist whose entire job seemed to be forming a human barrier between the board and the public. She asked me if I had an appointment. I told her I had something better, standing. Eventually, a man named Curtis Holmes shuffled out. HOA, operations manager, mid-50s, receding hairline, tan blazer like he was auditioning to be ignored. He blinked at me like I was a human error code. I introduced myself. He paled. "Oh, you're Mr. Riggs. Well, we did send notices. Multiple ones, in fact." "To where?" "Your registered address." "You mean the house you sold while I was deployed overseas?" He stiffened. "Sir, the HOA process allows for action after 90 days of delinquency. You hadn't paid your quarterly dues since—" "I paid in full before I left. I sent the payment online on June 2nd. You cashed it on June 3rd. I've got the bank receipt." He hesitated just long enough to confirm what I already suspected. He wasn't ready for someone like me to show up in person. "Well, perhaps it didn't post to our ledger," he offered. "Sometimes there's processing delays." $368.42, I said. "That's what I supposedly owed when you began foreclosure proceedings, right? And somehow, for that amount, you took a $100,000 house and auctioned it for $1,100. "The fees accrue rapidly," he said stiffly. "Administrative costs, late penalties. Funny how all that accrual went straight to a couple related to Karen Bishop." His jaw clenched. Bingo. Karen Bishop, the queen bee of Silver Bluffs. HOA president, micromanager-in-chief, and self-proclaimed guardian of community standards. She used to complain about my flag being too military forward for the aesthetic of the block. Once left a note asking me to repaint my mailbox. Now, apparently she was arranging fire sales on homes she didn't like. I didn't need more circumstantial evidence. I needed documentation. Ben called while I was walking back to my truck. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "According to the county records, your payment is marked returned unpaid, but I spoke to your bank. They never rejected it. There's no return. They falsified a rejection." "Looks like it." I requested a certified copy of the HOA's ledger. If they altered the record to make it look like a payment didn't happen, that's fraud, I finished. "And I can prove it," Ben exhaled. "We're going to need a forensic accountant and possibly law enforcement." I sat in the cab of my truck, staring at the dashboard. They'd erased me. systematically, surgically, and with just enough fake paperwork to make it look legit. They waited until I was gone, half a world away, to gut my life and hand it over to relatives. This wasn't incompetence, this was a setup, and they picked the wrong guy to screw over. 3 days after my meeting with Curtis Holmes, I had a flash drive in my hand, a stack of HOA documents fresh off a subpoena, and a growing suspicion that what happened to me wasn't just a one-off screw-up. It was surgical, calculated, and I was going to carve it open. Ben and I sat across from a forensic accountant named Terry Lohman. She was a former IRS auditor with eyes like a hawk and the attitude of a woman who had caught more embezzlers than colds. She had the Silver Bluffs ledger up on one monitor, my bank records on another, and a third screen with metadata from the scanned delinquency letter I supposedly received. This document, she said, tapping the third screen, was created on September 12th. That's when they claim they sent it, I said. Right, except it was backdated to July 29th. Metadata doesn't lie. They fabricated the original notice, then printed it and entered it into their system weeks later to make it look like proper notice had been given. I felt my pulse throb in my temple, so they knew I was paid up, and they faked the date to cover the sale. It gets better, she said with a cold smile. Your payment? It hit their account on June 3rd, like you said, but the ledger shows it being reversed on June 5th, marked as bounced. But I spoke to your bank. No NSF, no reversal, no communication from HOA to the bank at all, which means someone manually changed that entry in their system. A red flag. And the buyer. Terry opened a fourth window, a purchase contract. It was laughably thin. Private auction, held Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. in the HOA conference room. No public notice, only 2 attendees. Let me guess, I muttered. Winner, Sandra Kelly, relationship sister-in-law of Karen Bishop, HOA president. The other bidder, Eric Bishop, her son. Bidding war, supposedly, for $1,000. $1,100. They really fought it out. My jaw tightened until it popped. Ben leaned forward. That makes it a related party transaction conducted without proper public notice. That's breach of fiduciary duty. More like organized theft, I muttered. And it gets worse, Terry added, clicking again. Sandra Kelly signed a flip contract 2 days later with a local developer. They're trying to resell the house for $175,000. The contract's already in escrow. They were trying to flip my father's home for profit before I even touched back down on American soil. Terry nodded. And they were in such a hurry, they didn't even bother to clear the liens. You still show on record with a veteran's tax exemption. They left that flag active. I sat back, heart pounding, fury rising like steam through my ribcage. We can burn them with this, right? Ben smiled. This isn't just civil, this is criminal. We'll hit them with fraud, breach of contract, wrongful foreclosure, and, if we get the DA involved, conspiracy to defraud a federal service member under the Service Member Civil Relief Act. And the buyers? If we prove they're complicit, and given the family ties and flip contract, they're going down with the rest. I couldn't speak for a moment. I stared at the photos Terry had pulled from the escrow site. There was my house, my porch, my windows, listed like cheap meat on a butcher's rack, with words like move-in ready and recently acquired under distressed property program. Distressed. That was the word they used. A few days later, we served notice to the HOA, to Karen Bishop directly, and to Sandra Kelly. Injunctions were filed to halt the property transfer. We demanded immediate restoration of title and financial damages. Ben wasn't subtle. He included press contact info in the filing for maximum visibility. Karen responded by locking down the HOA office, citing staffing instability. Their lawyer filed a motion to dismiss, claiming everything was done by the book. We filed a motion for expedited hearing and attached a forensic report showing the altered ledger, the forged mailing records, and the fraudulent auction timeline. And then I got the call. Channel 5 News, local station. Sergeant Riggs, we saw the filing. Would you be willing to speak on camera? I hesitated for maybe 2 seconds. Absolutely. 2 days later, I stood in front of my stolen house, with a microphone in my face and a camera rolling as I told Arizona exactly how the HOA had robbed a veteran while he was overseas serving his country. The headline that aired that night: Veteran returns from deployment to find HOA sold his house for 100s. Buyers were president's family. The comments section lit up like a bonfire, and the phone at the county prosecutor's office started ringing. 3 hours after the local news segment aired, my phone nearly overheated. I got calls from people I hadn't heard from in years. Old buddies from Basic, my squad leader from Bagram, even the guy who used to run the PX back in Qatar. My mom cried. My CO sent a text that just read, "Raise hell, Sergeant." And then came the call from the National Guard press liaison asking if I'd be okay with them sharing my case in their weekly bulletin. Turns out, when a veterans' rights story hits Arizona prime time, people listen, especially when the villain is a smug HOA president caught selling off the home of a deployed airman like it was a scratched-up yard sale item. That week, the story spread like brush fire. The Arizona Republic ran a feature, Deployed and Dispossessed. Then NBC picked it up, then Military Times. I even did a segment on a national podcast where the host kept calling Karen Bishop the foreclosure queen. I'll admit, that one made me laugh, but all the noise had teeth, and the people with the biggest jaws were just starting to bite. By Friday, the Office of the Arizona Attorney General issued a public statement confirming they were reviewing allegations of property misconduct and HOA abuse involving the Silver Bluffs community. Senator Collins, an old-school Marine, herself released a video slamming the HOA and calling for immediate investigation into predatory actions against our deployed service members. Then came the avalanche. The prosecutor's office called Ben to confirm they were opening a formal inquiry, not just civil, criminal. They wanted everything we had: payment records, metadata, transaction history, HOA board meeting minutes. Ben backed up 3 external drives worth of documentation and personally handed them off to the assistant district attorney. The cherry on top, the Service Members Civil Relief Act, SCRA, got activated. Turns out HOA foreclosure while the owner is on active duty. Not just unethical, federal offense. Ben filed a federal complaint with the U.S. Department of Justice. I signed a sworn affidavit that outlined the timeline, the notice failures, the forged backdating, the family flip sale, and the fact that my attorney of record, clearly listed in my SCRA protection file, was never contacted. But it wasn't just me anymore. After the media attention, more victims started to come forward. A woman named Linda, 72 years old, said the HOA foreclosed on her house while she was in hospice care recovering from surgery. A widower named Carlos had his RV pad seized after the HOA tacked on junk fees and sold the parcel out from under him during a hospital stay. All of them had one thing in common: they were temporarily gone and never received proper notice. It wasn't a bug. It was a feature. This wasn't about community enforcement. It was a scheme. A system. They were targeting people who couldn't fight back in real time. Elderly, deployed, hospitalized, anyone without boots on the ground. By Tuesday, Karen Bishop was swarmed by press. She tried to dodge reporters in the HOA parking lot, hiding behind sunglasses and mumbling about respecting process. That same evening, Channel 5 aired leaked audio from a past HOA meeting where Karen joked about finally getting that noisy. Vet's place cleaned up. The internet did the rest. Her Yelp page got torched. Reddit threads popped up tracking her real estate deals. Someone dug up campaign donations from developers tied to her cousin's brokerage firm. Then came the real hammer, an official notice from the Arizona State Real Estate Board that her broker's license was under investigation for ethics violations. 2 days later, the prosecutor's office executed a search warrant on Silver Bluffs HOA headquarters. Agents wheeled out boxes, laptops, filing cabinets. They hauled away the entire desktop computer from Karen's office. When the footage aired on the news, I sat in my truck, engine off, watching the screen on my phone with my arms crossed and a slow grin forming behind my teeth. Ben called that night. "They're moving fast," he said. "Too fast for this to be just you." "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, "the DA has probably already connected this to wider financial crimes. HOA board members padding invoices, awarding contracts to relatives, rerouting auction proceeds. They're trying to get out ahead of a federal indictment." Is that why Karen's lawyer just quit on her? Wouldn't be surprised. One of the assistant managers, Roger Ellis, flipped this afternoon. He's offering full cooperation in exchange for immunity. That same night, I got a message on Facebook from a woman named Jenna. She'd grown up in the neighborhood and now worked for a nonprofit that helped veterans navigate housing discrimination. She wanted to help me start a fund for displaced vets, called it Operation Homebound. I didn't say yes right away. I wasn't ready to turn this mess into a movement, but the idea was there, and it had teeth. I walked by my house again, still occupied, but now under court injunction. Sandra Kelly, the buyer and Karen's sister-in-law, was nowhere in sight. Her lawyer had filed an emergency motion to block the court from freezing her resale escrow. Denied. Her profits were dead in the water. The porch light I'd installed with my dad flickered on automatically at dusk. It still had my motion sensor, still lit the walkway just the way we said it. It didn't matter what their paperwork said. That house still felt like mine, and I was about to take it all the way back. By the time Karen Bishop's mugshot made it to the local news, I wasn't even surprised. She looked like someone who just found out her neighborhood bake sale got raided by the IRS, which, given the contents of the arrest warrant, wasn't far off. It started with a sealed grand jury indictment. Then came the press conference. The county prosecutor stood flanked by two sharp-suited state investigators and read off a laundry list of charges that could have come straight out of a financial crime thriller. Fraud. Conspiracy to defraud under color of law, tampering with legal notices, misuse of HOA funds, mail fraud, racketeering. Karen was taken into custody without bail. Ben was the one who called to tell me she'd been indicted on 12 separate counts, and that wasn't even the end of it. The board treasurer was next, then the secretary. The HOA vice president, her name was Colleen Harper, a realtor who'd overseen 5 previous auction flips just like mine, turned herself in the next morning. The most damning part? Karen's desktop computer, the one they carried out in a big evidence bag, had internal emails showing she'd deliberately altered notice templates to backdate legal warnings. In one email to the board, she wrote, "He's a ghost overseas. No one will stop it. Just wait until the 90 days roll and make it disappear." That ghost just called the cavalry. At that point, the case stopped being just my story and became a full-blown state scandal. The Arizona Republic ran a weekend front-page headline, "The HOA that hunted its residents." CNN picked it up. Late-night talk shows ran jokes about foreclosure Karen. I even got a phone call from a documentary producer who wanted to do a full episode on predatory HOA tactics. But I wasn't chasing cameras. I was chasing justice. And it came fast. We were granted an expedited civil trial based on the strength of evidence and public interest. Ben moved to immediately void the property transfer, citing criminal fraud, breach of statutory notice obligations, and SCRA violations. Our judge, a no-nonsense Vietnam veteran named Judge McKellen, didn't waste time. First day in court, Sandra Kelly tried to weep in front of the jury, claiming she had no idea the home was taken from a deployed soldier. Ben calmly introduced a text message from her to her daughter, sent 2 weeks before the auction. "Karen says the military guy won't be back before Christmas. If we flip fast, we'll be in and out before anyone notices." Oops. We also brought in Roger Ellis, the flipped assistant manager. He testified for 2 hours, detailing how Karen personally signed off on altering delinquency records, burying notices, and intentionally timing auctions for low attendance. She used to joke that soldiers made perfect targets, he said. She'd call them ghost owners. No one to fight back. The room went still. That was the moment the jury stopped seeing paperwork and started seeing blood. Meanwhile, the HOA's own defense team tried to argue that, according to the bylaws, everything was technically allowed. That's when Ben stood and calmly asked if anyone on the jury thought a $1,000 foreclosure made sense for a $100,000 house after a single missed quarterly payment. That was never actually missed. They didn't answer. They didn't need to. The judge ruled to restore the deed immediately to me, pending formal final judgment. That night, I returned to the house. The locks were changed, again, but this time, with the court order in my hand, I had the sheriff by my side. Sandra was gone. Her furniture was gone, but the walls still held the smell of someone else's life. The deputy stood watch while I stepped inside. I didn't cry, but my hands shook when I opened the hall closet and found it empty. No uniforms, no medals, no pictures. They'd thrown it all out. Ben later said the HOA had hired a third-party cleanout service that dumpstered everything that wasn't nailed down. Some of it might have gone to a storage facility, but most of it gone. That included the wooden flag case I built with my dad, the original Navy issue from his retirement, his last gift to me. My next call was to the prosecutor. I want every single contractor who touched this job interviewed. I want every dumpster manifest. I want every invoice and receipt. And if they tossed my father's flag, my voice cracked. I want someone to answer for that. He didn't argue. He just said, "Understood." Back in the house, I stood in the middle of my living room and listened to the silence. No Karen, no Sandra, no fake buyers, no lies, just me. And the smell of desert dust coming through the vents. And that's when I decided I'm not done yet. 2 weeks after the court returned the deed to me, I received a call from a man named Ken Dawley. He introduced himself as a regional investigator from the Arizona Attorney General's Office, Property Crimes Division. He sounded like a guy who'd seen one too many HOA horror stories and lost the ability to be surprised. Still, even he admitted my case was the ugliest one to go public since the Sun Valley seizure scandal of '09. Ken wasn't calling to update me. He was calling for help. They were opening a multi-county probe into predatory HOAs using foreclosure loopholes to target deployed military personnel, widows, and the elderly. Silver Bluffs was just the tip of a long, moldy iceberg, and apparently, I'd become the guy to talk to. So I talked. I gave them my full timeline, every document, every letter. I walked them through the forged delinquency report, the timing of the auction, the fake signatures, the shredded mail. Ken nodded through all of it, but then he asked a question that caught me off guard. "Do you happen to remember the name Francis Newell?" It took me a second. Then it clicked. Francis had been my neighbor across the cul-de-sac. World War II vet, used a walker, used to sit on his porch in the evening and wave at me when I mowed the lawn. Passed away a year ago. His house was vacant after that. That house, Ken said, was also foreclosed and sold by Silver Bluffs for $5,000. Claim no next of kin. Turns out he had 2 living daughters. They weren't even notified. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about me anymore. The next month blurred into a flurry of subpoenas, affidavits, media requests, and quiet late-night calls with other victims. A woman in Tucson whose property was sold while she was in hospice. A Korean War vet whose townhome was taken over a clerical error. A single mother who missed 2 payments while hospitalized for surgery and returned to find her condo reallocated. All the same pattern, all the same players. Karen wasn't just overzealous. She was orchestrating a fraud ring. The financial side started unraveling next. An audit revealed Silver Bluffs had been funneling HOA fines into a dummy consulting firm listed as Property Compliance Solutions, LLC. The sole manager, Karen Bishop. The treasurer, Dale Forney, was her cousin. That shell company billed the HOA for legal services, landscaping, lock changes, none of which had ever occurred. The books were cooked. The invoices were fake. The kickbacks were real. Ken shared one bank statement with me. 21 separate transfers under $600, spaced days apart to avoid federal reporting thresholds. It was textbook structuring. The HOA was laundering theft through pseudo-legitimate operations and hiding behind the veil of community governance. It made me sick. Meanwhile, my attorney Ben was preparing for the civil damages phase. We weren't just after property restitution anymore. We were going for compensatory damages, punitive damages, legal fees, and emotional distress. And we had receipts. Literally. Receipts for my furniture, now gone. Receipts for my father's flag, never found. Receipts for repairs I'd made over the years. Receipts for everything Karen's fake auction had stolen from me, piece by piece. I spent hours reconstructing my house. Not physically, but financially, legally, emotionally, trying to trace each photo, each memory, each memento. One item stood out, a small brass compass my dad gave me before basic training. I'd kept it in a drawer near the front hallway. Gone now. Probably trashed by someone who didn't know it was the last thing I ever got from him before he died. Ben told me, "When we present this in court, we're not presenting numbers. We're presenting theft of identity, of dignity, of home." He was right. The depositions were brutal. Karen's face was a mask of arrogance, even in handcuffs. She pleaded the fifth nearly 80 times. When asked about forged notices, she smirked. When asked about my father's memorabilia, she rolled her eyes. When asked whether she considered the ethics of targeting active duty personnel, she said, "I enforce rules. I don't read feelings." The jury took note of that. By the time the damages trial began, the courthouse steps were crowded with local news vans. Protesters held up signs. Veterans stood in formation with folded arms and solemn faces. Someone had printed my story and passed it around. My house had become a symbol. I hadn't asked for that, but I was damn well going to use it. The trial courtroom was packed wall to wall. Local journalists sat shoulder to shoulder with military families, HOA watchdogs, and even a few curious retirees who, judging by their muttering, had fought their own HOA demons in the past. The air buzzed with a kind of quiet, restrained fury. This wasn't just about me anymore. I'd become the face of something bigger, whether I wanted to or not. The case of Riggs versus Silver Bluffs Homeowners Association et al. Opened with a bang. My attorney Ben laid out a brutal, methodical narrative in his opening statement. No theatrics, no emotion, just a scalpel cutting through flesh. He showed the timeline, the payment record I'd made before deployment, the forged HOA ledgers, the fake auction. He held up a copy of my deployment orders and said plainly, they sold a soldier's house for $1,100 while he was risking his life overseas. Then the jury saw the footage. Security camera footage from a neighbor's ring cam, capturing HOA board members entering my property days after the auction, carrying bolt cutters, trash bags, and boxes. The footage wasn't just incriminating, it was infuriating. Karen herself was seen pointing at my shed, instructing someone to toss it all. Nobody's coming back for this junk. The courtroom gasped. One juror leaned forward, arms crossed, jaw locked. It only got worse for the defense. We presented bank records showing a direct line between HOA funds and Karen Bishop's personal checking account. We had emails between her and her cousin Dale Forney, the HOA treasurer, joking about finding another ghost house to flip and milking the rule book dry before the state wakes up. Then came the witnesses. A forensic accountant detailed how Karen's consulting company had received nearly $70,000 in vendor payments from Silver Bluffs, none of which could be verified by any contractor or invoice. Then a mail carrier testified under oath that he had not delivered any foreclosure notices to my listed forwarding address, nor to my attorney, despite HOA records stating otherwise. And then, the buyers of my house, Margaret and Tom Levine, took the stand. They had originally refused to speak, but after learning the full story, they cooperated fully. They admitted they'd been told the owner abandoned the property and that the auction was legal and final. When Ben showed them my father's flag folded in their garage, one of the few items we'd recovered, they both broke down in tears on the stand. Karen's defense? Paper thin. Her lawyer argued that the HOA had acted within its emergency authority and that non-payment of dues, even during deployment, justified the foreclosure. But the jury wasn't buying it. The judge interrupted twice to ask clarifying questions that left Karen's lawyer stammering. Then came Karen's own testimony. It was a disaster, cold, defensive, smug. She offered no apology, insisted she had done her job, and when asked if she felt remorse, replied, "I regret that people don't follow the rules. That's how we get chaos." There was silence. Then Ben asked his final question. "Ms. Bishop, do you believe the rules of a homeowners association outweigh the rights of a U.S. citizen serving overseas in combat?" She paused. "Yes," she said, "if they're part of the HOA." Ben smiled. He wasn't. 3 hours later, the jury returned. Verdict in my favor, unanimous, damages awarded, $750,000 in compensatory and punitive damages, plus full legal costs, plus a permanent injunction barring Silver Bluffs from any future property actions involving deployed military personnel without judicial oversight. But that wasn't the end. The state launched formal criminal charges against Karen Bishop and 2 other HOA board members for fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, theft, falsification of legal records, and abuse of fiduciary duty. Federal investigators from the DOJ's Elder Abuse Task Force added their own case on top. Karen was arrested again, this time in court, in front of everyone. She didn't cry. She just scowled like a kid caught cheating on a test. The Silver Bluffs HOA was dissolved within a week. The state revoked its charter, citing a pattern of systemic abuse and criminal enterprise under the guise of community management. I got my home back, officially, on paper, in court, on the news. But more than that, I got justice. The lock clicked, and for the first time in over a year, I stepped across the threshold of what is, my home. The place had been stripped to the bones by the time I got it back, but it didn't matter. The walls were still mine. The foundation, the frame, the land beneath it, mine. Legally, officially, spiritually. It was as if my name had been scraped off the world and finally carved back into place. I walked room to room. No furniture, no photos, just emptiness and dust. My father's Navy insignia was gone, along with the shelf it used to sit on. The flag we salvaged from the garage now lay in my duffel bag. I took it out and unfolded it slowly, smoothing it with both hands before laying it across the floor where the mantel used to be. The air was still, except for the low hum of wind brushing against the screen door. Arizona sunsets had a way of lighting everything on fire, even the ashes of something that had nearly been stolen forever. The first week back, I didn't rebuild. I documented. I took photos of the damage, ran electrical diagnostics, surveyed every inch for code violations the buyers had left behind. My lawyer said I didn't need to. Court was over. The verdict stood. But it wasn't for the court. It was for me. Reclaiming territory, reasserting control. I'd been trained to rebuild radar systems under fire. I could sure as hell fix a house with a clean deed. Word traveled fast. Neighbors I barely knew before started stopping by. Some brought cookies. One guy, Jim, a retired Air Force mechanic, dropped off a toolbox and said, from one NCO to another, a church group offered to help repaint. A vet from 2 streets over volunteered to install new cabinets. I didn't ask for any of it. They just showed up. That's when I knew this wasn't just about me anymore. The week after the HOA's dissolution, a small local nonprofit reached out, Veterans Against HOA Abuse. I didn't even know they existed. They asked if I'd speak at a town hall. I didn't plan to, but I showed up, told my story. Just facts, no drama. I ended up speaking for 40 minutes. Then the floodgates opened. Dozens of vets, elderly homeowners, single moms, people who'd been bullied, fined, threatened, evicted by HOAs, lined up to speak. Some cried, some brought paperwork, some just nodded silently when I looked at them. That was the moment I realized I wasn't going back to normal. I couldn't. So I pivoted. I built a memorial on the corner of my property, a low stone wall lined with bronze nameplates. Each plate had the initials and years of veterans who lost their homes under negligent HOA action, as one lawyer called it. I had already collected 12 stories. The wall had room for more. Above it, I hung a sign in red and black steel letters, private property, not in an HOA. Trespassers get lawyers, not warnings. Reporters loved it. It ended up on national news. The story got picked up by major outlets. I was invited to speak on morning shows. One station called me the sergeant who sued an empire, but I didn't want to be a symbol. I just wanted people to stop getting robbed under cover of bylaws. So I joined the fight. I started helping others, connecting them with legal help, giving testimony in legislative hearings, writing articles on deployment rights, military exemptions, real estate fraud, HOA overreach. The irony? I didn't even want to be part of an HOA. I'd never signed up, never paid into it. The whole thing had been a fabricated illusion with forged documents and a forged justification. And yet, that illusion had nearly destroyed my life. But it didn't. I'm still here, still standing, still home.